So in dealing with complicated problems, the question arises, how complicated? Can you put a number on how complicated a particular problem is? And if you could, it's useful because you can then attempt to match the right level of resource to the difficulty of the particular problem. So I'm going to attempt to do that. So if you take the sphere I work in, education technology, if you're trying to create a new solution, such as a workplace readiness online course, and if a skilled person could put something decent together in like a year, we're going to call that a 1. Now, you don't, when you embark on something like that, you frequently think it's going to take a year, it can take 3. But we're still going to call it a 1 because we're comparing it with things that might be a 100 or a 10,000. So it's orders of magnitude we're dealing with here. We're trying to get it to. So creating a first version of a solution, we're going to call a 1. This is the technology adoption life cycle. And I'm going to talk through the levels of complexity of taking a solution, creating a solution, getting some traction with some early adopters, scaling it up to mainstream users, and what's involved in this. Now, this model, the technology adoption life cycle, is very close to my heart because in the early 2000s, I was putting together our marketing plan for SAM Learning, and I was deep in that process. And I had been, I've been reading Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell on holiday. And in Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell says that the tipping point, you may know, is around how do things suddenly take off, how do trends happen, and how does I was very concerned. I was very close to my heart because I wanted SAM Learning to take off. And so Malcolm Gladwell says the application of the tipping point thing, how does something suddenly take off when it comes to technology? The book to read is Crossing the Chasm by Geoffrey Moore, this book here. So it was already a bestseller. This is in the early 2000s. It was 1 million copies in print back in the day. And it's one of the top 10 marketing books of all time. This is in 2000. So it's, sold a lot more since. Since then, there've been a series of books by Geoffrey Moore, and this one here, The Chasm Companion, is with his colleague Paul Weifels. They're technology consultants in Silicon Valley, advising companies on how to, market their technology businesses, how to market their businesses and have massive successes. So in early 2000, I'd been, having read Crossing the Chasm, I was then reading The Chasm Companion. So this is the one that's like a workbook with these different, it's got, different 2x2 matrices, or, different models that you apply and worksheets and things like that. And I've been doing that for, here you go, this worksheet thing, for the SAM Learning go-to-market marketing plan. And I actually managed to get Paul Weifels on the phone and had a 2-hour conversation with him, because this book that is written primarily for technology that's sold business to consumers and to a lesser degree business to business. And I was selling something to schools. It's a different type of market. In his framing, they'd call it a B2G market, business to government. And there were certain things I thought would work differently, but it was theoretical. So the 2-hour conversation, I said, have you got any clients who are B2G or selling into education? Yes, loads. So why isn't it in the book? Because we have to simplify it, and we didn't want to, complicate it, and it's a minority group within overall technology businesses. Fine, so we talked it through for 2 hours. He was on his way flying to the UK and flying through Heathrow to Dublin, and we thought we might be able to meet at Heathrow, but it never happened in the end. But nevertheless, I'm very grateful to this book that cost, £8 or £9 and led to a successful business in SAM Learning, which was a life-changing thing for me and my career. So anyway, back to this. So the way we applied this model in SAM Learning, there's about 6 different phases of the technology adoption life cycle in the book, and we simplified it to 2. And when you're working with this material, it gets very complex very quickly, because it isn't particularly working with schools. You've got to look at it for every stakeholder. There's a graph like this for local authorities, for schools, for different job titles within schools. So the basic thing is you start with trying to sell into early adopters. There's actually an uber early adopter group in the formal theory, but the early adopters is 16%. And there's certain characteristics, certain way you need to communicate and message to them to get them on board. And then the mainstream are totally different, think in a totally different way. You almost need a different product to be successful. You almost need a different leadership in the company to be successful in the mainstream versus the early adopter phase. It's very, very different. And the students, for example, were from day one, from 2000, you could just get them straight on online learning, and the whole group were mainstream. There was no sort of, get this early adopter group of students on board, anything like that. But within leadership teams in schools and at local authority level, this model really just nailed it. But we simplified it down to early adopters and mainstream, and that worked for us. So the little vignette we give in our think piece, the 10-page document in Innovate Ed, talks about someone with Suhail who's got a maths solution for neurodiverse learners, and he was a teacher. He's got a process that he used with great success with neurodiverse learners, and he's trying to package that into an online learning program and then take it to scale to be successful. So there's basically 3 phases of that. There's creating the solution, which is a 1. Now, there's things smaller than a 1. I come across people who will approach me and say, we need to do something about, I don't know, neurodiverse reading, or whatever the particular problem area is. There's a problem. Can't we do something with online with that? Now that isn't a solution. That's kind of an idea of a problem. That's a lot less than a 1. That's like a 0.1,000th or something, or maybe 100th. And then at certain points, Suhail was at a stage where he had something that worked, a way he could teach individual students who were neurodiverse maths in a better way, and they learned better through that approach. But he hadn't packaged it into an actual product. And that's maybe 1/10 of 1. So packaging it into a product's really hard. And maybe it's more than 1/10, maybe it's 30% of 1. But 1, you've got a solution, you're ready to try it in a school that isn't yours, where you don't control the people. You can't tell people to do stuff. They'll only do it if they are on board with your approach. They like you and very passionate about the problem that you solve, in this case, and teaching neurodiverse learners maths. Then you're in an early adopter market, because it's only people who are proactive and will work with you on it, that will adopt, and most people just don't want to know. And they're right not to want to know, because it's not ready. It's not ready for them, for the mainstream group. So the early adopters come on board, and you knock all the rough edges off. In this stage, I'm grateful to Patrick Wall for this insight, and his feedback on the document led to the discussion with him. It's probably, let's credit Patrick. This is Patrick's idea. Is that at this early adopter phase, what you're working on as a solution provider is making the product work for the user, which is the student, and proving it. You get your efficacy studies, you might win awards. There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of excitement around what you're doing, the potential to do something to help students that couldn't be helped before at scale. So this is where all your excitement is. But the time you get here, you're boring. I'll a funny story about that, but it's maybe one for another day. So, and you're building a small team, and people will. Joy Medeiros came to me talking about a mentoring program they have at the Zion Centre in Croydon, I think. And she was saying, we've got this mentoring program, it's working really well. We've no idea how to get it out. We'd love to get it out to more schools, but we've no idea how to go about it. And well, it's the right thing to say. I mean, I've got a good idea how to go about it, but people don't want to hear it. Because when you've got a good solution, you think that's the whole thing. You think you solved the problem. And unfortunately, it's a 1, and getting it out to more people is like a 10 in terms of the complexity. Now, why is that? I think to a layman that would seem like nonsense. To me, it seemed like nonsense in the early days of SAM learning, because the things that you need to do to get something out there are things very often you're not interested in and you don't want to have anything to do with. Like, if I was to say to Joy, you need to build a national sales force, she probably wouldn't be very keen. But so yeah, and you know, in the early days of SAM learning, building a national sales force was not, I needed to bring in someone called Jonathan Wells, who to bring that to the organization. I couldn't do it. Today I couldn't do it, I don't think. So there are a number of things which in their own way are a 1, meaning it could take a smart, capable person a year to work on that problem and solve it. And they're not to do with the product. So there are things like how you communicate and market the product's about as difficult as creating the product. In ballpark terms, it's a similar difficulty of problem. I've mentioned building a sales team, hiring, motivating, incentivizing salespeople, creating all the collateral, creating the figuring out the model of the process of selling the product and training people to do it. That whole sales piece is about a 1. It would take a capable person like Jonathan Wells a year-ish, months or 6 to 18 months to figure out to get that really working well. The finance piece is about a 1. How do you do this with no money, or how do you get money, and how do you pitch to people and raise money to do it? So that's about a 1. The finance piece. What other pieces are the customer support piece? So building a model whereby schools can be onboarded onto your product. You can assign all the user credentials. You've got a support process. You've got a methodology of keeping institutions and users engaged and using the product and benefiting from the product. That whole customer service area is about a 1. And the other thing I found, when you've got these diverse pieces, each of which is a 1, and you put them together, they don't add, they kind of square and cube the complexity when you get different elements interacting with each other, and you've got to lead a diverse team, like, diverse in terms of the different functions they have and the different problems they need to solve. There's a complexity of its own. So a small team, I mean, you could roughly think about these numbers as team size. So a startup team might be 5-6 people. It's less than 10 anyway. And that's what you need to go from beyond something where you've built a solution you can do with a person, or maybe someone and a programmer, I don't know, first version of a product to 1. And so people would argue with me, say you need a small team to create a product, and say certainly it can be done that way, and but it's another order of magnitude having a small team that's taking something to market, and then if you can succeed in getting into mainstream, and like Sam Learning had a couple of thousand schools, and you might have a team of, say, 30 or 40. So that's now tens. So the complexity index of how you put a number on the complexity of a problem is an individual, a small startup team, a successful solution that's in the mainstream, so that might be 100 or 10 to the power 2. A successful category, so you've got several companies of different sizes, might be 10 to the power 3, possibly 4. So a category might be online learning in the UK for curriculum subjects. And then a successful industry, meeting all these different sectors of education, all these different user needs that other than just academics, and multiple categories of solution, meeting those needs. 10 to the 10, I don't know, but it's big. It's many, many orders of magnitude more than just having a successful category or a successful individual solution. Okay, have I covered everything there? I hope I have. Alistair, are there unanswered questions? I'm sure there are lots. Thanks for listening.